Clarence Worley was not the kind of man people noticed twice. A comic book store clerk, he lived his life between the bright panels of superheroes and the neon lights of a Detroit movie theater. His birthdays were usually spent alone, watching martial arts double features, dreaming of worlds bigger than his own. But on one fateful night, his quiet, lonely routine was shattered when a blonde woman with a spark in her eyes spilled popcorn on his lap. Her name was Alabama. She was bold, charming, and full of energy, a striking contrast to Clarence's shy awkwardness. She laughed too loudly, touched his hand without hesitation, and by the end of the night, Clarence felt like he had stepped into the very comic book fantasies he cherished. What he didn't know, at least not at first, was that Alabama was a call girl, hired by his boss as a birthday surprise. But when she confessed the truth, expecting him to recoil, Clarence only smiled. Something in her vulnerability, in the way she admitted she wanted a different life, pulled at him. They talked until sunrise, and before the day was over, Clarence was certain of one thing. He loved her. The feeling was wild, reckless, and absolute. Within days, Clarence and Alabama were married in a tiny courthouse, exchanging vows with the kind of certainty most people spend a lifetime chasing. To Clarence, Alabama wasn't just a woman. She was his chance at happiness, his partner in a world that had always felt empty. To Alabama, Clarence wasn't a client. He was her ticket out, the one man who looked at her with unshakable love. But their blissful new life came with shadows. Alabama's past wasn't just something they could walk away from. Her pimp, Drexel Spivey, a violent and unpredictable man, still loomed over her like a dark cloud. Clarence knew that as long as Drexel was alive, their happiness would never be safe. And so, in a decision that would change both their lives forever, Clarence picked up a gun, kissed his new bride, and walked straight into Drexel's lair. What began as a love story was about to spiral into something much darker, where passion, violence, and destiny collided in ways Clarence had never imagined. Drexel Spivey was no ordinary pimp. He thrived on chaos, a predator dressed in cheap robes and dreadlocks, ruling his seedy underworld with brutality. When Clarence showed up at Drexel's den, the air was thick with danger. Clarence wasn't a fighter, not really, but love made him reckless. For Alabama, he would do anything. The confrontation was violent and swift. Words turned into threats, threats turned into blows, and soon, Clarence was fighting for his life. By the end of it, Drexel lay dead. His reign of terror over Alabama finished. Clarence walked away, battered but triumphant, his heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Before leaving, Clarence grabbed a suitcase, believing it held Alabama's few belongings. He wanted to erase every trace of her past and give her a clean start. But when they opened it later, they didn't find clothes or makeup. They found bricks of pure cocaine, millions of dollars worth. For Clarence, this was both a blessing and a curse. The drugs represented freedom, a chance to build a future for him and Alabama far away from Detroit. But it also meant danger, because someone somewhere would be looking for it, and not just anyone, the mafia. Still, blinded by love and adrenaline, Clarence convinced Alabama that this was their ticket out. They would sell the drugs, take the money, and disappear. She trusted him completely, her heart too full of devotion to question the risk. Together, they set off for California, chasing their dream of freedom. But freedom never comes without a price. Drexel's death had not gone unnoticed, and the stolen cocaine belonged to people far more ruthless than Clarence could imagine. As they drove west, the mob traced their steps. The police grew suspicious, and the walls around them began to close in. What Clarence thought was an act of love had turned into a deadly game of survival. Los Angeles shimmered in the distance like a promise. Clarence and Alabama arrived with hope in their hearts, ready to turn the cocaine into cash. Clarence reached out to an old acquaintance, a struggling actor with connections in Hollywood. Soon they had a meeting lined up with a flamboyant movie producer who might just be desperate enough to buy the drugs. For a brief moment, life felt almost normal. Clarence and Alabama lounged by motel pools, whispered dreams of the future, and held each other as if the world couldn't touch them. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Alabama could feel Clarence's paranoia growing. He kept checking mirrors, watching strangers too closely, as if he knew danger was always one step behind them. And he wasn't wrong. The mob had tracked them to California. Sicilian gangsters, armed and merciless, were closing in fast. To them, Clarence and Alabama weren't lovers on the run. They were thieves who had stolen what didn't belong to them. One night, as Alabama returned to their motel room with groceries, she found herself face to face with one of the mobsters. What followed was brutal. Alabama fighting desperately for her life against a man twice her size. Bruised and bloodied, she refused to give up. By the time Clarence returned, she was standing, trembling over her attacker's unconscious body. Her courage stunned Clarence. In that moment, he realized their love wasn't fragile. It was unbreakable. Together, they weren't victims. They were survivors. But survival meant moving faster. With the mob on their heels and the drug deal looming, Clarence and Alabama braced themselves for the storm that was coming. The deal was set in a luxury hotel room, a suitcase full of cocaine exchanged for stacks of cash. Clarence tried to act confident, but inside he was unraveling. He wanted only one thing: to take Alabama far away from this life of guns and fear, into a future they could call their own. But fate had other plans. As the deal unfolded, the police raided the hotel, guns blazing. At the same time, the mob burst in, demanding their stolen cocaine. The room erupted in chaos, a three-way standoff where everyone pointed guns, shouting, threatening, daring someone else to fire first. And then the shooting began. Bullets ripped through the air, glass shattered, bodies fell. Clarence shielded Alabama, fighting through the madness as blood painted the walls. The love that had started with popcorn and laughter was now tested in the middle of carnage. When the smoke finally cleared, Clarence lay bleeding, his face pale, his body broken. Alabama dropped to her knees beside him, tears streaming, refusing to let go. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the dream had ended in tragedy. But Clarence, stubborn and full of love, clung to life. Alabama pulled him out of the blood-soaked room, dragging him into the sunlight of a new day. Months later, they were in Mexico, far from Detroit, far from the chaos. Clarence wore an eye patch, a scar across his face, but his smile was brighter than ever. Beside him, Alabama cradled their young son, the family they had risked everything to create. They had defied death, the mob, and the law. In the end, theirs was not just a story of crime and violence, it was a story of love. Reckless, dangerous, unstoppable love. Because for Clarence and Alabama, true romance wasn't about safety or perfection. It was about choosing each other, no matter the cost.